Well, hello there everybody, my name is Cameron and this is The Academy, the first riddle. It is a Professor Layton meets Harry Potter style adventure puzzler. Comes to us from developer Pine Studio, who are also behind the Faraway series, which I believe is now up to its fourth entry. Those were sort of Myst-inspired puzzlers. This is, as I say, very much Layton inspired, though it does also offer this sprawling school to explore that lends it some variety and makes it a bit more interesting than just a Layton knockoff. This is within the first half hour or so of the game. The premise is that you play as a young guy called Sam who turns up at the prestigious Arbor Academy, sits the entrance exam and is quickly accepted in. I reviewed this over on pocketgamer.com, just replaying the start now to give you a rough idea of how it plays, what it's like, how it looks. As you can see, it looks pretty good actually. The character designs are fairly cartoony, though what makes this really stand out are the environmental designs. As I say, it is vaguely inspired by Harry Potter, at least in terms of just the general premise of this sort of magical school. This obviously looks quite different to Hogwarts. It is inspired a little bit by Zagreb, which is the developer's sort of home city, I suppose. Once we're finished talking here, you'll be able to see a bit more of the school environment just racing through the text. There is an awful lot of story here to see along the way. It is all fairly compelling. The dialogue is a little bit stiff here and there, but mostly serviceable and enjoyable. Characters are all pretty likeable too. So here we are, having a little wander around now in the main hall of the academy. So let's now head outside and go on this brief school tour. Very nice, very nice. So yeah, the game in general does look pretty appealing, I find. Obviously, fairly strong, cartoony style to the characters. The school benefits from some nice lighting and a decent level of detail. It's obviously not going for hyperrealism, but the different areas all do feel distinct and interesting to explore. You'll also find lots of little plaques as you go around that will give you a bit more information on the school and all the strange characters that have lived there in the past. It just helps to flesh out the setting and make it feel like it is a place that has existed for a fair while. So let's now continue on the guided tour of the school, where we'll hopefully find a couple more puzzles in a minute or two. And yeah, speaking of the puzzles, there are a great many of them, I believe about 200 or so, and they do vary in quality quite a bit, I find, especially when the game is trying to intentionally mislead you. An example of that is found fairly early on during the entrance exam, where you're given a fairly standard maths question, and the follow-up question directly links to the previous one, at least in terms of the stated premise. It says the next question will require a slightly more complex mathematical approach or something along those lines, and there's really no suggestion, at least to me, that the game is trying to mislead you at that point. So I spent quite a while just using every possible combination or whatever that I could think of, and of course it had nothing to do with the previous question or any sort of maths question. It was a visual puzzle instead. So I don't think they get that balance quite right. It is obviously quite tricky. Here we're seeing another sort of visual puzzle, much easier than really anything up to this point. And yeah, that can be a bit of a problem as well. The puzzles don't really progress in difficulty. You'll get one that is really difficult and then a few that are super easy, then one that's really difficult. It might just be a personal thing, but that felt like it was the case the whole way through. There was no sort of ramping up of the challenge. You do get, for every puzzle, a standard puzzle and then one that is a slightly harder version of that original one, and it's usually with this follow-up question that the game attempts to mislead you or, as I say, elaborate on that original puzzle in sometimes interesting ways and sometimes more frustrating ways. So this is obviously still critical path stuff. There are little side things to go and collect throughout the school day. So for example, the librarian will drop a book in a random place around the school every day, and that will have a puzzle inside. One thing I really like about the game's approach to its level of challenge is that you can basically just skip over any puzzle that you like. So even if you do hit one that is a tremendous dud, you can just jump past it and come back at a later date if you want to. And that really helps the game's pace to remain pretty brisk, and any potential frustrations that may arise from those puzzles is sort of, skipped over with ease. One thing that is not so fine are the touchscreen controls at the moment. You might see me here bumping into things and struggling to handle the camera. It is very cumbersome. There are two different modes. There's the virtual joysticks, and there is the more traditional, I guess, point and click mode. But in both you have to control the camera, which is held slightly off center. And some games use this really effectively. It's often used when you're trying to pull attention away from the protagonist and onto the environment. Here though, it just sort of exacerbates the pre-existing control issues that I'm coming up against. There's no precision to it, and it never really gets any easier. Even after these introductory stages, you're always going to be coming up against control issues, and that would obviously be alleviated if it had controller support, which it doesn't, which is especially annoying because this is going to be a console release, I believe later this year, and it is also on PC at the moment. So the lack of controller support is a bit of a shame. I would have liked to have seen it. It would have made my experience with the game a whole lot easier. I wouldn't be constantly bashing into things and struggling to position my character so that they can open a locker or whatever might be required for a puzzle. So yeah, let's go and try and find the optional book now. Here we are. So yeah, there is a lot to see and do, and while, as I say, it is hit or miss, I think this could be a good one just to play late at night when you're trying to unwind and relax for a bit. I would say that overall I enjoyed it more than I didn't, but really that's just by the skin of its teeth. If you want to see some more fleshed out thoughts, I do have a full written review over on pocketgamer.com. And while I'm not the game's biggest fan in the world, I think that a lot of the problems that are there could be fixed or improved upon over time. So yeah, maybe this is one to sit out on just for now until controller support arrives. Obviously it's never ideal, you want to be able to play a mobile game with touchscreen controls, but in this case it is just going to, I think, frustrate. It certainly did to me. And while it didn't ruin my experience with the game, it felt like a constant hurdle or a constant barrier in the way of enjoying it as much as I wanted to, and as much as I probably should have, because this is a really solid game. So yeah, I think that will do it for today's video. Hopefully that's given you an idea of whether the Academy at the First Riddle is something you'd enjoy. It is out now for iOS, Android and PC over on Steam, coming to consoles later on in the year. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.